In 1946, a man named Norman Timbs came home from work, walked into his garage, and started building a car that had no right to exist. He had no factory, no production line, no corporate budget. He had aircraft tubing, aluminum sheet, a wooden pattern he had carved himself, and 3 years of evenings and weekends. What he built in that garage was so far ahead of everything being sold in American showrooms that when it appeared on the cover of Motor Trend in October 1949, only the second issue the magazine had ever published, readers wrote in asking which manufacturer had produced it. Nobody had produced it. One man had built it, by hand, in his garage. Norman Timbs was not an amateur enthusiast with ambition exceeding his ability. He was a professional automotive engineer who had worked with Preston Tucker on the Tucker automobile and contributed to several Indianapolis racing cars. He understood chassis dynamics, aerodynamics, and structural engineering at a level that most production car designers of the era could not match. When he decided to build his own car, he approached it exactly as he would have approached any professional engineering project. With comprehensive chassis drawings, quarter-scale clay models of multiple body concepts, and a wooden pattern incorporating the best elements from everything he had modeled, the wooden pattern became the form over which he hand-shaped every aluminum panel of the body. Each panel was formed individually over the wood, then welded to its neighbors to create a single unified structure. There was no stamping, no casting, no industrial process of any kind. Every curve on the Norman Timbs Special exists because Norman Timbs put it there with his own hands. The result was a car 17.5 feet long on a 117-inch wheelbase, standing just 39 inches tall without the windshield and 47 inches with it. For comparison, a standard American sedan of the late 1940s stood around 60 inches tall. The Timbs Special was not merely low. It was aerodynamically considered in a way that production cars would not approach for another decade. The total weight was 2,500 pounds, light for its size and a direct consequence of the aircraft tubing chassis and aluminum bodywork that Timbs had chosen specifically for their strength-to-weight ratio. Power came from a 1948 Buick Straight 8 engine mounted just behind the driver's seat in a mid-engine configuration, a layout that racing car engineers understood but that production automobiles would not adopt for mainstream use until the 1960s. Placing the engine behind the driver and ahead of the rear axle gave the Timbs Special a weight distribution that conventional front-engine cars of the era could not achieve. Steering, brakes, and ancillary equipment came from standard Mercury components, a practical decision that ensured parts availability and mechanical reliability without compromising the custom engineering that defined everything else about the vehicle. The bodywork incorporated solutions that reflected Timbs' engineering background at every detail. The rear body section was hinged and raised hydraulically to provide access to the engine compartment, fuel tank, and spare tire. The fuel tank was positioned between the rear wheels for optimal weight distribution. The front hood covered a luggage compartment rather than an engine. The mid-mounted power plant freeing the nose for storage in the way that modern mid-engine sports cars do as a matter of course. Taillights came from a 1939 Ford. The total build cost, according to Mechanics Illustrated in September 1949, was $10,000. The equivalent of roughly $130,000 today, spent over 3 years of personal labor on a vehicle that one man built because he wanted to see if it could be done. It could be done. Motor Trend put it on their cover. The automotive press treated it as a vision of what American cars could become. Timbs had intended the Special as a prototype for a limited production series reflecting advanced concepts in performance and aesthetics. That production series never materialized. The economics of low-volume custom manufacturing in post-war America made it impossible. But the car itself existed as proof that the concepts were sound. The Special changed hands over the following decades. By 1954, it had been painted white and was owned by an Air Force officer in Manhattan Beach. It appeared in an episode of Buck Rogers. For several years, it sat in the California desert, slowly deteriorating in the heat. In 2000, it appeared briefly in the Nicolas Cage film Gone in 60 Seconds. In 2002, it sold at Barrett-Jackson auction at the Peterson Museum for $17,600. A price that today seems almost incomprehensible for what the vehicle represented. The buyer was collector Gary Cerveny, who began restoring the car himself before handing it to Custom Auto of Loveland, Colorado to complete the work. The car was approximately 90% original when Cerveny acquired it. The body halves bolted together at some point in its past, access holes cut into the bodywork for the rear wheels and engine bay. The restoration returned it to the condition Timbs had intended. In March 2010, the restored Special debuted at the Amelia Island Concours d'Elegance and won the RM Auctions Trophy for Best Open Car. Later that year, it was selected for the prestigious Customs, Then and Now exhibit at the 2011 Grand National Roadster Show. In 2012, it competed at Pebble Beach, the most prestigious automotive concours in the world. Then, in November 2018, the Malibu wildfires reached Gary Cervini's collection. The Norman Timbs Special and more than 30 other cars burned to the ground. A car that had survived the California desert, a film career, decades of neglect, and a Barrett-Jackson auction was gone in an afternoon. What saved it was a decision made before the fire that nobody could have known would matter. Someone had digitally recreated the car's body on a computer. A precautionary archival measure that at the time seemed like thoroughness and in retrospect was the reason the car exists today. Gary Cervini, refusing to accept that the special was finished, used that digital record as the blueprint for a complete reconstruction. Restorer John Bothwell of Costa Mesa, California took on the project. The aluminum body alone required 2 years to complete. The same painstaking hand-forming process that Timbs himself had used, applied by craftsmen working from digital measurements of a car that no longer physically existed. The reconstructed Norman Timbs Special made its debut at the 2024 Amelia Island Concours d'Elegance on March 3rd, 14 years after its first appearance at the same event following the previous restoration. It won Best in Class in the Sport Customs category. A car built by one man in a garage in the late 1940s, destroyed by wildfire in 2018, rebuilt from a digital ghost, winning awards in 2024. Norman Timbs built the special because he wanted to see if the ideas in his head could exist in the physical world. The answer was yes in 1948, and it remains yes today. The car has now been built twice by 2 different sets of hands across 8 decades, and it keeps winning. That is not the story of a custom car. That is the story of an idea that refuses to accept the conditions imposed on it.